What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm coming at you with an updated Marincess deck profile for the new format. Marincess, obviously a fan favorite on the channel, and going into the next format, it does have some pretty big upsides. Obviously, it just gets to play an absurd amount of non-engine and have a pretty consistent combo that leads to a lot of really good follow-up and just some really strong plays overall. So before we hop into this profile, I do want to let you guys know we are closing in extremely close on 15,000 subscribers, so if you guys like what I do here on the channel and want to support that, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me and what I do here. Of course, if you're a big fan of Marincess, you're going to want to be subscribed because I upload Marincess content pretty regularly when I'm active on this channel because it's just a favorite deck of mine. And yeah, with all that being said, let's hop into this Marincess deck profile. Alright, so starting off with the monsters and, our Marincess monsters, it's pretty standard. Nothing really changes with this ratio. I think I have the ratio I like set in stone. We have 3 Blue Tang, the best starter of the deck because she just does so much, potentially allowing you to get an extender for free off of her effect and essentially play through hand traps with a 1-card starter. Has always been insanely powerful. And we have 3 Spring Girl, a very powerful extender for the deck, and one of the best extenders simply because she doesn't require you to control anything. You just need a Marincess Engraved to banish, and then she can special summon herself. And then another extender would be the 3 Pascalis, another one of my favorite extenders because she doesn't really care about certain interruptions because she quickly puts 2 bodies on board, which can help play through things like quick effect pops or banishes like Mirror Jade, or help you play through like an SP banish because you'll still be able to put an extra body on board to keep playing. 3 Seahorse, just one of the premier extenders as well because just special summon her to any Marincess zone is very powerful. Again, most of these Marincess monsters and ratios are very standard, so I'm going through them quickly. Seahorse, in my opinion, to say anything about her, is a little less good because of her level. If she was level 4, she would be absolutely phenomenal because it would allow you to get into so many more like Bahamut Shark into totally awesome plays, but you're still going to maximize her at 3 because she's one of the best starters and extenders, so you definitely want to maximize this card. 2 Mandarin, some people play 3, however, I like 2 because I always play a different Marincess and essentially what is her 3rd slot. Mandarin is really good, especially going 2nd in my opinion because she allows you to play through boards a little bit easier being an extra body for free, and especially in certain Zelantis lines, she's very relevant. I think you can play 3 of this if you don't want to play the next Marincess I'm going to show, but overall I've always been on 2 and that's really not going to change for me. Unless something like big happens to Marincess as an engine, and then I'll consider that in the future. And then the last Marincess monster I choose to play is the Basilalima, something I've played in almost all of my lists. People tend to play like a 3rd Mandarin over this, some people play the Sleepy Maiden. I like Basilalima because it gives you something that no other Marincess monster can really do, and that's like allow you to combo through certain interrupts, like especially versus a card like Runic Flashing Fire is an example I like to give. Like if you open Blue Tang as like your only starter and you don't run Basilalima, your combo's probably not getting anywhere, and it's like that for a lot of Marincess monsters, but if you are able to have Basilalima in graveyard, it can protect you from things like that. Again, one of the biggest ones is Runic Flashing Fire, but there are others. A big one this format would be a card like the Voiceless Voice Trap card, where if you don't have Basilalima, you might lose to the trap's popping effect. However, Basilalima essentially makes that card near irrelevant, and I really like this card. If you draw it, it's still fine. It's like opening just Pascalis. You get to like the same combo there, but I really like the utility she provides to the Marincess engine just by being in the deck. That is 15 Marincess monsters onto the Marincess spells and traps. We have the 1 Battle Ocean, sort of just an engine requirement you're forced to play, and it allows you to equip, all your Marincess Link monsters in your graveyard out spells and traps, which is good for especially Argonaut, and also just for follow-up in general. 2 Dive, some people like playing 3. The issue I have with 3 is obviously opening multiples, and worse than that, opening multiples when you don't see a Marincess monster. I've enjoyed the ratios at 2 for this card for essentially the entirety of my time playing this deck. I just think 3 is a lot. It does mean you hit it more often off Blue Tang, but I just don't think that's worth it because you also don't really want to see multiple of this card almost ever. Once you have 1, it's just like infinitely recyclable. And lastly for the Marincess engine is 2 Marincess Wave. This card is extremely powerful. I don't like playing 3 because I think it is very bad going 2nd in so many game states because you're forced to play going 2nd, and having this card doesn't help you play. I do like it sometimes at 2, and especially because I'm on Desires, like you don't want to banish both waves, so this gives you some help with Desires to sort of mitigate the fact that you might banish all copies. And I do like the fact that you can obtain 2 at the same time, which is very strong. So 2 has been a number I've been relatively comfortable with, and also 2 is better if Droll is in the format, which we don't really know how popular Droll is going to be just yet. But when Droll's in the format, I like 2 Wave because sometimes you can mill it off Spring Girl or access it off your first search with Tang, and then you're sort of like fine not searching for the rest of the turn. And that is it for the Marincess engine in its entirety. That is 20 cards, which means we have 20 non-engine. Having said that, I think this next card is actually arguable whether it's engine or not, but I've just counted it as non-engine. It is the 3 Pot of Desires. This card is absurd in this deck because you almost don't care about anything you banish. There are cards you would rather not banish, but overall it's fine even if they do get banished. That would namely be like the field spell because it's a 1-of, you don't want your dives all banished, and of course you don't want your waves banished. Everything else is fair game, and honestly you usually try to search those before you activate Pot of Desires. But if you can't, you know, Desires is the card that can help you break through boards and just see combo if you like completely bricked. So Desires is extremely powerful in this deck. It is just essentially Pot of Greed. On to hand traps. I'm only playing 9 in this list because I have kind of split it between board breakers and hand traps. I think I'm playing the hand traps I think are like best right now overall, like just covering the most matchups. And then I have board breakers as well because I think they could be very good this format considering we don't really have as many Omni Negates, which I think is the first time in a while. So going on with the hand traps to start the non-engine, we have 3 Ash Blossom. Very strong because this deck has always had an issue with like Labyrinth and Branded, so I think Ash is worthy in the main deck, even though it can be heated. 3 Infinite Impermanence, just like generically one of the best hand traps, and it cannot be like Talents. It's always good for that reason, and it's a good 6th draw. And then I'm on Nibiru as well. I think Nibiru is obviously very powerful and very popular, or is going to be very popular this format, I mean to say. Also, this deck has just a glaring weakness to Nibiru. It always has. Like, if you don't get to Totally Awesome, you're probably going to get Nibiru'd. So the best counter to that is usually having your own Nibiru, to be honest. And I just think Nibiru's like a mainstay in this deck for that reason. Also helps you potentially OTK on the next turn because Marincess does have an issue with OTKing quite often as well. There are Zelantis lines that get you to OTK, but you do need quite a bit of engine to get there. And then, like I said, I'm pretty split on hand traps and board breakers. So to start the board breaker part of the non-engine, I'm on Triple Droplet. This card has always been relatively strong in this deck because you do get a lot of free resources and you're a 1-card starter deck, so you could send anything or like everything but Blue Tang and still be fine as long as they have no more interrupts. Droplet's always been pretty solid in this deck overall. You have a couple of free cards to send, and it's something I'm completely fine playing, but if board breakers turn out not to be good or we don't need droplets, you can definitely swap this for maybe like 3 Effect Veiler if we feel like we need more hand traps. 2 Cosmic Cyclone. This card, I think, fixes a lot of problems Marincess has always had, which is like sometimes you can deal with the monsters with certain card effects or like Forbidden Droplets where you hand trapped them, but face down cards like Imperm can end up being a problem, even though Imperm is a bad example because this deck usually just eats through cards like Imperm and Veiler. But another example is just like the engine traps in the format, right? Like something like the Voiceless Voice Trap is very powerful versus this deck, and things that remove bodies in general, like Sword Soul Blackout, for example. So this card can obviously hit cards like that, face down Imperms, any face down interrupt in general. However, it also hits other important cards like Fire King Island. That's a big one. Obviously, Cosmic Cycloning the Fire King Island can get you very far ahead. I think Cosmic's really good. It just hits a bunch in the format in general. It does have like a couple of weird matchups. Like I don't think it's that great versus Branded. Overall, I think it's a solid card going first or second. So I'm maining 2. You could also take these out for Veilers if you don't like it, or maybe try Ghost Ogre because I think that card's pretty strong as well. But yeah, 2 Cosmic Cyclone. Then I am on 2 Triple Tactics Talent and a Called by the Grave. I've always played these because, I mean, Called by is obviously really strong and it hits Princess this format, which Princess can be quite the problem for Marincess. And Talents I really like because it always fits well in 1-card starter decks. Now, if we're not on a hand trap format, maybe Talents is removable for other cards. Maybe Board Breakers you find to be better. You can even play Monster Reborn to help against Nibiru. But as long as there are like a solid amount of hand traps in the format, Talent stays good going first and second, and I think overall is worth running. Alright, on to the extra deck. It's mostly standard, however, I am running it a little bit different than I normally do, and I guess I'll explain that as I get there. With the very standard stuff, we're on the 2 Blue Slug. You can choose to play 3 of this. It does come up from time to time. I'm on 2. It's usually all you ever need, but if you don't like something else in the extra deck, you can feel free to run a 3rd copy of Blue Slug. We have the Double Sea Angel. This is always more than enough. Just searches your dive and your field spell. 2 Coral Anemone. Again, very standard. You're always playing minimum 2 of this in the extra deck, and it runs through like all your lines run through this card. For link 3s, we have the Coral Triangle and the Marbled Rock. Now, I do want to speak about Coral Triangle because this is actually one of the reasons I haven't been playing Marincess recently. Well, one, I guess we've been in a couple of powerful formats. So like Marincess hasn't been on my radar as much as other decks, and 2, I already have like 2 regional tops with Marincess. so like I haven't been taking it to regionals as often. But and what I mean, like how I'm talking about this card in the current format, and essentially ever since Age of Overlord, SP coming out has really hurt this deck for the foreseeable future. Not only is she kind of hard to play into with this deck, but like your opponent can just make it as like a piece going second and banish your triangle and graveyard because presumably your monster's unaffected because of wave. So they're going to banish the monster in your graveyard, which is going to be Coral Triangle. So SP has like nerfed this deck for the foreseeable future to at least some extent. I do think like she's overall fine to play into. This deck works perfectly fine in the format even with SP, but it's something I've noticed is the fact that she can just be made as your opponent's like climbing into better links and just trying to break your board to just banish your best piece of follow-up. And that can be tough. Of course, Bubble Reef can bring her back, but it is something I wanted to note. And it's like one of my least favorite things about Marincess post Age of Overlord. For the Link 4s, the ever so important boss monsters from Marincess, we have the one Bubble Reef and the one Argonaut. Obviously, since we don't run Sleepy Maiden, Argonaut comes up a little bit less. You have to have Field Spell for her to be extremely useful. Bubble Reef, of course, is kind of the main one, especially if you don't play Sleepy Maiden, so you're always trying to end on one of these. And that is 10 Marincess links, which is pretty normal. Again, it could be like 11 if you wanted to play the third Blue Slug, but I think it's fine with just 2. Then I am running one Zelantis. This card is like the Marincess card. Obviously, every other deck is using it these days, ever since, Raging Phoenix Zelantis OTK combo has existed. But originally, this was like almost exclusively for Marincess. It's very powerful because essentially you banish everything, and they don't get any of their monsters back except for water, so it's usually just a board wipe. And it's used like in almost all of your OTK lines because this really gave Marincess the ability to OTK quite a bit easier. Then I have one area which you're usually not using her to actually steal water monsters in your opponent's graveyard. In fact, I can't think of many very usable water monsters right now that are in other people's decks. However, you usually use her just to play around Nibiru because if you're able to put up like 2 additional bodies after getting nibbed, which is not as hard as it sounds, you're able to turn like one of them and the nib token into area, and then you can turn this and the extra water you have into Marbled Rock. It comes up and I do like playing the area. Then I have Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome, which I haven't played in a while, but especially with the idea that Nib is going to be super popular, I like the idea of playing these. They don't come up very often because we're not running like Abyss Shark or Silent Sea Nettles to facilitate making very easy Bahamuts. However, if you open like 3 engine pieces, you can almost always make Toad before going into your combo line, which is very good. I mean, if you're going to draw all engine, you're going to want either extra interrupts or at least to make sure your combo goes through, and I do think these are worth playing for that reason. It's not like most Marincess players do choose to play this package, but it's not like standard in every Marincess list. In fact, like a year ago, you would find many Marincess lists without those, but I wanted to add them back in for this list. And then the last card I'm playing is Kragan. Now this is what I meant is a little different. I'm running 3 Xyz monsters, which is pretty rare. I've had a list with Toad and Bahamut, but no Kragan. I've had a list with Kragan, no Toad and Bahamut. I've only had a few lists where they're both present, but the thing about Stealth Kragan that I love and why I'm choosing to play it, one, I think in Fire format, it's like a fine card because it can be like almost a little tiny floodgate. The main reason I like Stealth Kragan is because it's like the only way this deck ever plays through Nibiru. Like this deck, or I said Nibiru, I meant Dimension Shifter. The only way you're gonna like survive Dimension Shifter is if you're able to make this card first turn, and even then, it's a pretty slim chance. But that's just how it is. Like this deck gets cooked by D-Shifter, always has. You can't like make Bahamut Toad under Shifter because Toad won't work. You have to make Kragan, and I have 1 games under D-Shifter because this card was in my extra deck, and I always like this as sort of a failsafe if I'm gonna get D-Shiftered. I don't just want to be, dead in the water for, I mean, that was horrible because it's a water deck. But yeah, that's essentially why I like running the Stealth Kragan. And that's gonna be it for this deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been a while since I've really got my hands on Marincess and thoroughly tested it in the format. So the list is, I guess, a little standard, but I also think Marincess in general remains standard because it's not super innovative with what you can do with the list. Like you could run Abyss Shark if you wanted to, Silent Sea Nettles. You can go for like a Thrust Monster Reborn sort of package with other like Good Go Second cards, but you can also just do that in the side deck, which is a little more consistent. Let me know what you think down below, how you would play the deck differently, if there's any cool techs you've been running in Marincess, how you feel about the deck this format. I'll be sure to read those. And with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.